Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No notifications, no sounds, no one calling your name. Just silence. But instead of peace, you feel an itch. Not a physical one, but something crawling under your skin, whispering that you should be doing something, checking something, consuming something. So almost instinctively, your hand reaches out, phone, remote, tab switch, anything to sever the unbearable presence of your own mind echoing in silence. You weren't bored, you were terrified, not of the room or the silence, but of yourself. You've been told that distraction is a symptom, an unfortunate side effect of the modern world. That your phone is the villain, that social media hijacked your brain, that dopamine has you by the throat. But what if the truth cuts deeper than that? What if distraction isn't the disease, but the drug? What if it's not hijacking you at all, but protecting you? Protecting you from what? From having to face your own existence. Let's not pretend otherwise. You already know the hollow aftermath of compulsive distraction. You've closed the 10th app in a row, barely remembering why you opened the first. You've bounced between tabs, watched hours of meaningless content, and still felt unsatisfied, not relaxed, not entertained, just dulled, like a blade made to cut through the world that has turned inward and started slicing itself instead. You know this loop intimately. So does everyone around you. It's the unspoken contract of our age. We agree to numb ourselves as long as we don't have to feel too much or think too hard. But why? Why does silence frighten us more than noise? Why does stillness feel like suffocation? Why, in an age of infinite knowledge, connection, and stimulation, do you often feel more lost, lonely, and anxious than ever before? Here's a darker thought. What if distraction is not just a habit, but an identity? What if your self has been carved pixel by pixel out of fractured attention spans and fragmented purposes? What if the person you think you are, the one constantly multitasking, constantly refreshing, constantly reacting, isn't you at all? What if it's a mask made of motion? And if you were to stop, truly stop, what would you find beneath that mask? Can you even remember what it felt like to be fully present, to be in a moment so vividly that time didn't matter? When your attention was a sword, not a sieve. No, that's not your fault. You were never taught how to wield your mind like that. You were raised in a world that profits from your disorientation. Every ping is a leash, every scroll a sedative, every swipe a subtle act of forgetting. Forgetting what? Maybe it's the question that haunts you at night, that surges forward when the lights go off and the screen finally dims. That question you keep silencing with content and noise. Who am I when I am not distracted? The modern world has taught you how to do almost everything, except how to be alone with yourself, and in that inability lies a quiet terror. Because to be alone with yourself means to confront everything you've buried beneath layers of stimulation, regrets, dreams deferred, truths too sharp to hold, and the immense weight of your own potential left untapped. It's easier to look away, so we scroll. We scroll not for content, but for relief, not for joy, but for escape. We don't seek stimulation, we seek anesthesia. And yet, the more we try to escape, the more the walls close in. The very distraction we use to flee becomes the prison we can't break out of. But here's the question you must now face, not passively, but as an act of existential courage. What if distraction isn't stealing your time, but your soul? What if the constant noise isn't just annoying, but eroding the foundation of what it means to be human. What if, in seeking to feel less pain, you've also numbed yourself to beauty, meaning, and depth? What if the world you experience is only as deep as your attention allows it to be? And what if your attention is no longer yours? You might already feel it, that rising urgency, a quiet rebellion stirring in the back of your mind, a sense that something precious has been lost, and it's time to reclaim it. But before we can even dream of freedom, we must first understand what we're truly up against. Not just screens, not just apps, but something far more ancient, far more intimate, a hidden force beneath distraction itself, a force that has always lurked in the depths of the human psyche. And that is where we go next. Distraction is not new. Before smartphones, there were newspapers. Before those, there were taverns, gossip, rituals, and wars. Humanity has always found ways to look away from the terrifying confrontation with the self. The real question isn't, why are we so easily distracted? It's, why are we so desperate to not be fully present? To answer that, we must descend into the architecture of the human soul, into the recesses of a psyche crafted by fear, pain, and meaning-making. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." He wasn't being poetic, he was being precise. Your addiction to distraction is not merely a result of poor discipline or seductive technology. It is a defense mechanism, evolved and perfected. At the heart of this lies a psychological paradox. We long for meaning, yet flee from the silence that reveals it. You see, meaning doesn't come in loud, glittering packages. It doesn't shout through your notifications or sing from algorithmically curated playlists. Meaning is born in the silent, still places, where time slows and your attention sharpens to a single burning point. But those places are also where your demons dwell, and so we avoid them. We avoid the empty room not because it is empty, but because it is full of everything we've tried to forget. Distraction is not random, it's strategic. Your mind has mapped the terrain of your inner world, and it knows where the shadows live. It knows that stillness can unleash memory, that silence can resurrect pain, that boredom is not a void but a mirror. And we've become terrified of mirrors. Nietzsche warned of this when he said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." Now consider that every time you allow yourself to be pulled into distraction, you are not merely avoiding boredom, you are evading that abyss. But there's a deeper truth. Distraction is not just a defense against suffering, it is a defense against freedom. Because real freedom is terrifying. It means you are responsible, not just for your choices, but for your consciousness, for your pain, your purpose, your very being. Existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre understood this with razor-sharp clarity. He believed that freedom is a burden most people do not want. To be truly free is to no longer blame your past, your parents, your environment, or even your impulses. It is to stand naked before the enormity of your potential and say, "This is mine to live or to waste." But we don't want that responsibility, so we sedate ourselves with busyness, with scrolling, with infinite input that keeps us from having to feel too much or choose too consciously. We have not been enslaved by distraction. We have summoned it. Aldous Huxley foresaw this future in Brave New World. Unlike Orwell, who feared a society controlled by pain and oppression, Huxley warned of a society controlled by pleasure and apathy. In his world, there was no need for Big Brother, because people had stopped caring. They were pacified by triviality, controlled by their own craving for comfort. Sound familiar? You weren't dragged into this. You wandered in willingly, seduced by the ease of dopamine, the safety of predictability, and the illusion of connection. But here's the twist. While distraction feels safe, it actually exposes you to the most dangerous force of all. Existential drift, that slow erosion of agency, that quiet decay of authenticity, that subtle compromise of becoming someone you never consciously chose to be. This is where Arthur Schopenhauer's grim insight begins to echo. He believed that most human behavior is driven by a blind, unconscious will, a striving to avoid pain, to seek comfort, to survive. And if we do not rise above this unconscious current, we become slaves to it. Distraction is not just a response to modernity, it is the modern face of this ancient will. To avoid pain, to flee responsibility, to chase temporary highs in place of enduring truths. It's not the tech that's toxic, it's the soul that's starving. Viktor Frankl, who endured the unimaginable horrors of Auschwitz, spoke of a deeper force, the will to meaning. He observed that human beings can survive almost any suffering if they believe it serves a purpose. But in a world saturated with distraction, we lose that compass. We stop asking the deeper questions. We trade purpose for preference, depth for novelty, and the soul begins to shrink. This is why the problem cannot be solved by detoxing from apps or buying a dumb phone. Those are surface-level treatments, band-aids on a hemorrhage, because the real crisis isn't digital, it's existential. Distraction is not just the cause of our suffering, it's the symptom of our refusal to suffer meaningfully. To suffer without purpose is torment, but to suffer toward something, that is the crucible of growth, of selfhood, of transcendence. And yet here we are, numbing every spark of discomfort, silencing every whisper of soul, terrified of the one thing that could save us. Presence, the ability to be fully in this moment without escape, to witness the totality of your life, its pain, beauty, rage, hope, and remain intact. No filters, no shortcuts. But to do that, you must first recognize the price you are paying for your distractions, not in productivity lost, but in personhood abandoned. Because distraction is not neutral. It forms you, shapes your mind, trains your nervous system to live in fragments, to be everywhere but never here. And the cost of that is not just time, it's the slow death of who you were meant to become. Next, we must open our eyes to the invisible damage, the quiet consequences of a distracted life that now define our very culture. You think you're just checking your phone, just watching one more video, just refreshing that feed, but underneath those small habitual motions, repeated hundreds of times a day, something far more profound is happening. You're being rewritten, not in a dramatic dystopian way, no microchips or conspiracies. This is subtler, slower, more terrifying. Every distraction trains your nervous system to crave fragmentation. Every notification conditions your brain to seek reward without effort. Every escape from boredom rewires your psyche to recoil from stillness. The result? You become a creature who can no longer sit within themselves, who cannot follow a thought to its end, who cannot linger long enough in discomfort to birth anything true. That is the real cost of distraction. You lose your depth. You don't just lose attention, you lose intimacy. with your own thoughts, with others, with reality itself. You begin to relate to the world like a ghost, hovering over moments instead of inhabiting them. A dinner with friends becomes a backdrop for a story you'll post later. A walk in nature becomes a podcast episode you'll half listen to. A conversation becomes a performance. A thought becomes a tweet. Everything becomes content fodder for external validation because you've forgotten how to validate your experience from within. This is the age of disembodiment. We live more in our screens than in our skin, more in opinions than in observation, more in curated images than in raw presence. We are everywhere and nowhere, and this dilution of self is not accidental. It is engineered. You are being rewarded for distraction, praised for speed, fed constant novelty, because a distracted mind is a predictable mind. A fragmented self is an easily influenced self. In the economy of attention, you are not the customer, you are the product. And like any product, you are optimized for engagement, not for growth. That's why the algorithms push you toward rage, not reason, toward desire, not depth, toward impulse, not introspection, because depth doesn't click, patience doesn't trend, presence doesn't sell. But it's not just your behavior that's changing, it's your identity. Neuroscience reveals that attention doesn't just reflect your mind, it creates it. Where your attention goes, your neural pathways follow. Like a trail in the forest, the more you walk it, the clearer it becomes. So every time you choose a quick distraction over meaningful engagement, you reinforce that path. You make it easier to escape next time, harder to stay, harder to think, harder to be. This isn't just a personal crisis, it's civilizational. We are raising generations who don't know how to be bored, who panic in silence, who cannot read books, make eye contact, or sit still without checking a device. We call it progress. But what if it's erosion? A slow forgetting of what it means to be human. Not just efficient, not just entertained, but conscious. And as our inner world collapses into fragments, so too does our outer world. Politics becomes performance. Relationships become transactions. Work becomes burnout. Art becomes algorithms. Wisdom becomes content. Life becomes noise. All of it. Symptoms of a culture addicted to distraction. A culture that cannot pause long enough to ask, is this the world we want to live in? But here's the cruel twist. The more distracted we become, the more anxious we feel. The more anxious we feel, the more we seek distraction. It's a loop, a trap, a self-reinforcing spiral. Your nervous system was never designed for this level of overstimulation. It can't tell the difference between a tiger in the bushes and a notification badge lighting up your screen. It just knows arousal, stress, input. Over time, this leads to chronic activation, a state where your body is constantly bracing for impact, tight, tense, wired. And when that tension becomes unbearable, you escape the only way you've been taught, more distraction. So now you're not just avoiding presence, you're afraid of it. Because stillness feels like withdrawal, like pain, like death. But it's not death you're feeling, it's the ache of re-entry, the shock of landing back into your body, your breath, your actual life. And you've forgotten how to be here. Think about that. You are alive in this moment, in this skin, in this life. And you need a guide to show you how to experience it without panicking. What does that say about where we are? What does it say about what we've become? You were not meant to live like this. Not fragmented, not medicated by noise, not ghosting your own existence. You were meant to move through the world with presence, with coherence, with intensity. But the world taught you to numb that intensity, to trade it for convenience, to abandon your soul for stimulation. And now we see the result. Burnout, numbness, despair disguised as busyness, loneliness inside connection, an entire species, technically advanced, spiritually hollow. This isn't about guilt, it's about recognition, because once you see the cost, you can no longer pretend it's cheap. You are paying for your distractions, with your focus, your creativity, your relationships, your sense of self. And still, a deeper truth waits. Just beneath the wreckage, you can reclaim what's been lost. But it requires war, not against technology, but against unconsciousness. Not against distraction, but against the reflex to escape your life. This is where we pivot, because the next section is not about more despair. It's about revolution. The rebellion begins where the noise ends, where presence returns, where power is remembered. Let's go there next. The war is silent. No banners, no swords, no visible enemy. Just a quiet, invisible battle inside your mind, every hour of every day. A battle between the self that wants to be free and the self that wants to feel safe. Between the part of you that longs for depth and the part of you that craves dopamine. Between the soul and the algorithm. And here is the brutal truth. If you do nothing, the default wins. If you stay passive, the algorithm becomes your personality. But if you choose, even once, to resist the impulse to escape, you start to remember. The rebellion begins in remembering. Remembering that you are not your cravings, not your feed, not your schedule, not your thoughts. You are the one who watches them. You are the silence beneath them. You are the space that chooses. So how do you break free? You start by breaking a rule you didn't know you agreed to. The rule that says you must always be doing something. Try this. Sit in a room. No phone, no book, no music. Just you, alone, still. And watch what happens. Not on the outside, but inside. Watch the itch, the panic, the need to grab something, do something, prove something. That's the withdrawal. That's your nervous system detoxing from 1,000 tiny hits of distraction. It will feel like death, but it's not. It's birth. You are witnessing the return of your presence, and it will not be quiet, because freedom is not peaceful at first. It is violent. The mind thrashes, the ego protests. The entire internal architecture, built on speed, validation, escape, starts to crack, and something ancient starts to wake up. Stillness is not emptiness. It is a furnace, and inside it, all your illusions begin to burn. This is not productivity advice. This is a spiritual revolt. You're not just trying to focus more, you are trying to become more. To reclaim your life from every force that told you who to be, what to want, what to fear. This is not about deleting your apps. This is about deleting your addiction to avoidance. It's about choosing to feel what you've buried, to face what you've ignored, to hear what the noise drowned out. And when you do, you begin to rewire everything. You stop needing stimulation to feel alive. You stop outsourcing meaning to other people's opinions. You stop scrolling to escape and start creating to express. The energy once wasted on distraction becomes fuel for art, for clarity, for connection, for intensity. You begin to live like a fire, focused, fierce, and impossible to manipulate. But it requires more than silence. It requires structure. Because your environment shapes your habits, and your habits shape your mind. If your phone is within reach, your mind will reach for it. If your day is unstructured, your mind will fragment. So change the rules. Design your life like a monastery, not to escape the world, but to return to it fully. Create sacred spaces, moments where nothing is allowed but being. A walk with no headphones, a meal with no screens, a morning with no noise. These are not luxuries, they are acts of war. Because in a world that profits from your distraction, presence is rebellion. And there's more. You must shift your metric of success. Not, how much did I get done today, but how present was I while doing it? Not, did I respond to everything, but did I respond to anything from a place of depth? And most importantly, not, was I seen, but did I see? See the sky, see your own breath, see the person across from you without the filter of thought or agenda. This is where the rebellion becomes beautiful, because the more present you become, the more the world reveals itself. Colors deepen, time slows, conversations bloom, creativity returns, and life stops being a thing you perform. It becomes something you inhabit. You become real again. This is what the mystics knew. The monks, the poets, the rebels, they didn't escape distraction by accident. They designed their lives to eliminate it, not to become saints, but to become whole. Even Thoreau, retreating to Walden Pond, didn't do it to escape the world. He did it to confront it on his own terms, without noise, without illusion. You don't need a cabin in the woods. You need a commitment in the mind, a radical decision to stop letting the world decide how you live. This doesn't mean perfection. You will still fall, still scroll, still escape sometimes. But each time you will notice, and that noticing is the beginning of liberation, because now you are awake, now you are watching, and what you watch, you can change. One breath at a time, one decision at a time, one rebellion at a time, and with every small act of presence, you reclaim territory from the algorithm, from the past, from fear. You become the sovereign of your own attention, and that attention, it's the most powerful force you possess. Not just for focus, but for freedom, because what you pay attention to becomes your world. And when you take that back, you don't just get more done, you become more alive. Now, what if you took it all the way? What if you didn't just reclaim your attention, but used it to see something you've missed your entire life? A final, deeper truth, something hidden behind all the distraction, the craving, the rebellion, something ancient, something terrifying, something divine. That is where we go next. There is a moment, rare, disorienting, sacred, when the noise falls away completely. No buzz in your pocket, no flicker of screens, no chatter in the mind, just silence. And in that silence, something strange happens. You begin to hear you, not the conditioned version, not the curated persona, not the clever mind that narrates everything like a social media post, but the raw, untouched self, the one that existed before the world told you who to be. And in that moment, something even stranger occurs. You realize you've been running from this self your entire life. The addiction to distraction was never about boredom. It was about fear. Fear of meeting the one person you cannot escape, yourself. This is the final truth. You are not addicted to distraction. You are afraid of presence, because presence strips away all masks. It dissolves your roles. It exposes your hunger. It confronts you with the unbearable lightness and heaviness of being alive. To be fully present is to stand naked in the storm of existence, without shelter, no ideology to hide behind, no screen to protect you, no narrative to soften the edges, just you. breathing, mortal, aware, and that awareness, it burns. Because in that awareness, you see things you don't want to see, the grief you never processed, the dreams you abandoned, the love you withheld, the beauty you ignored, the finite nature of every single moment. Presence is not soft, it is brutal, it is intimate, it is truth, unfiltered. No wonder we escape it. No wonder we reach for the phone the moment reality starts to press in. Distraction is not the disease, it is the symptom. The disease is disconnection from ourselves, from each other, from the mystery of being. But here's the twist. That same presence you fear is also the only thing that can heal you. Because in the very heart of that terrifying awareness is a kind of love that doesn't depend on validation, a kind of wholeness that doesn't need performance, a kind of freedom that no algorithm can simulate. It is not something you can chase. It is something you remember. And when you do, when you let go of the need to numb, distract, achieve, explain, you come home. Not to a place, but to a state of being. The mystics called it stillness. The philosophers called it essence. The poets called it soul. It's the part of you that exists before thought, before preference, before identity. It doesn't need a name, it just is. And when you rest there, something radical happens. You begin to see clearly. You see that most of what you called you was just conditioning, that most of what you called truth was just repetition, that most of what you chased was an attempt to outrun your own silence. And now you stop running. Now you sit. Now you breathe. Now you see. You see the absurdity of trying to validate your existence through likes and achievements. You see the tragedy of living a life of constant motion, but never arriving. You see the miracle of this breath, this moment, this now, and it's enough. More than enough, because the secret is this. Reality is already complete. It doesn't need your productivity. It doesn't need your content. It doesn't need your constant improvement. It just wants you awake, not as a consumer, not as a performer, but as a presence. And when you become that presence, something incredible happens. You begin to change the world, not through noise, but through being. You listen differently. You love differently. You create not from hunger, but from fullness. Your work becomes a transmission of depth. Your relationships become sanctuaries of attention. Your very existence becomes a kind of medicine, not loud, not viral, but real. And in a world addicted to distraction, realness is revolutionary. So this is your invitation, not to do more, not to fix yourself, but to stop, to look, to return, to remember that what you were seeking in every scroll, every click, every escape was never out there. It was always this breath, this silence, this moment. It was always you. You are not broken. You are just buried under layers of noise, performance, avoidance. But the core of you, the witnessing, feeling, infinite awareness, is untouched. It's waiting, not for you to be perfect, just for you to show up, fully, fiercely, finally. Because once you taste that kind of presence, even for a second, distraction loses its power. You don't want stimulation anymore. You want contact with truth, with beauty, with being. That is the ultimate rebellion, and that is the ultimate truth. You were never meant to escape your life. You were meant to wake up inside it, and now you have. Not because of something you learned, but because of something you remembered. So take a breath, feel your feet, close your eyes, and ask yourself, what would my life look like if I were fully here? Then go live it, because the world doesn't need more content. It needs more consciousness, and that starts with you.